Test 1 2 test. Where's the popcorn? You'll have to come back in. You'll have to come back in September for the Taste of Mequon. We'll have plenty of popcorn here at City Hall. And if you march in the parade as a council member, we'll have lots of popcorn for you over at Village Park.
All right. Now that everyone's here, I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, June 13th to order. Please call the roll.
Alderman Strelchak? Alderman Talaco? Alderman Meyer?
Here.
Alderman Hancher?
Here.
Alderman Bach? Alderman Parrish?
Here.
Alderman Schneider?
Here.
Alderman Gebhardt?
Here.
Mayor Nurbin?
Here. First up is approval of the minutes from April 13th, or April 11th, sorry.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions on the minutes? Seeing or hearing none, all those in favor please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Next, discussion item, little update on the 2022-2025 strategic plan. Some of us were here when we created it, others are new, so Administrator Jones is going to give us a quick overview.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the committee. Given that we're a little late starting here tonight, I'm going to kind of keep my remarks and my story high level. And you all received the packet materials last week, and tonight I'll just kind of focus my comments on the materials that you've likely seen and read through in the packet that went out last Thursday. So just by way of background, as Mayor Nurbin explained, we kicked off a first ever strategic planning process with the City of Mequon back in the fall of 2021. As part of that effort, we engaged an outside consultant, Cheryl Trent from S-Brand Solutions, based in Fort Collins, Colorado. She worked with staff and the council in the latter parts of 2021 prior to a full-day retreat, which was conducted in February of last year. During the spring, after that one-day workshop with council and senior staff, staff in my office and Ms. Trent worked to develop a draft plan, which was then presented to the council here in June at a committee of the whole workshop, where we took some feedback and made some adjustments. Thereafter, the plan was adopted formally by the council last July, almost 1 year ago. As noted, the plan covers fiscal years 2022 through 2025, so about a 3.5 to 4 year period since adoption. And like many strategic plans, it includes a mission, a vision, values of the city, as well as 5 key focus areas. And under each key focus area, which we'll walk through here in a moment, there are goals, objectives, and notably projects which staff and the council and certainly the organization are authorized to pursue over the next couple of years. And as was explained, going into the strategic planning process and as we worked through the retreat, really having this overall plan or strategy is an effort to enhance alignment between council and staff as we do our policy and administrative work collectively administering the city. And up on the screen before you is a very good example of the alignment that we've been able to achieve through development of the strategic plan and the 5 key focus areas, 4 of which are listed up here. And as you'll note, this is the spending plan for the American Recovery Plan Act funds in the amount of $2.5 million that the city received back in 2021 and 2022, and which the council formally authorized a spending plan for last fall after we had completed the budget process. And as noted in the top columns, as I mentioned, 4 of the 5 key focus areas were the drivers behind the spending plan that we developed and approved and that we'll be following over the next couple of years. And interestingly, this corresponds, from a timing standpoint, very well with our strategic plan. Oops. So, you have the materials before you, and just, again, very high level, some of the early wins that we've been able to realize since we kicked off the retreat approximately 16, 17 months ago. The Highland Road interchange has been constructed. The city was a partner in funding that project. We've established the Southern Ozaki Fire and EMS Department with our partners in Thiensville. We've now joined the League of Wisconsin Municipality Risk Pool, which is comprised of more than 400 municipalities throughout the state of Wisconsin at a savings of almost $100,000 to our operating budget. We've installed traffic signal preemption equipment in all of our emergency response vehicles, which is improving our response times as fire trucks and ambulances go through intersections and they're able to trick the lights to their advantage. We're also in year 2 of the local road improvement program. We borrowed $5 million last year at 1.8% interest rate. And last year we completed more than $2.2 million worth of road work throughout the city on our local roads. As you know, we had a presentation on the compensation plan that was completed late last year, and we're now in the steps of implementing many of the preliminary recommendations. There will be a presentation here at the Committee of the Whole next month regarding future implementation steps that was previewed at the Finance and Personnel Committee meeting back in April. Lastly, as we'll all recall, we consolidated our emergency dispatch with Ozaki County as of January 1st this year. These were all called out as specific projects in the strategic plan, and these are amongst the early wins that we consider to be beneficial to the organization and the community as we move into years 2, 3, and 4. In progress, we've got the Water Utility Master Plan, which will be moving forth to the Council, or rather the Water Utility Commission, later this summer. The Clerk's Office has purchased electronic poll books, which were authorized through the ARPA spending plan, and we'll be implementing those for the special election to elect a new state representative, a member of the Assembly, at a special election, which will be taking place in July. Town Center public improvements, as we all know, are ongoing along Mequon Road and will be wrapping up sometime late this fall, and then streetscaping will be completed into the spring of next year. We've talked at least twice here at the Committee of the Whole about the Lemke Park Pavilion expansion project, which is also being funded in part through ARPA funds. Per the direction of the Council during budget last year, staff through my office and the Finance Department and to come Public Works is meeting with the library on a regular basis to identify certain areas where we can economize and share costs or even reduce costs, and we'll be coming forth with some recommendations during budget development season here in the August-September timeframe. The Finance Department, now that they've completed the closeout for fiscal year 2022, will redirect before we get heavy into budget and begin the process of implementing credit card acceptance for the city. And that'll be discussion here at Committee of the Whole and Finance and Personnel during the third quarter. And then, as was noted in the weekly bulletin about a month ago or so, Ozaki County is in the process of completing the staircase at Vermont Park, which will allow residents and visitors to Mequon to access Lake Michigan down the stairway. That project is scheduled to be completed and open to the public sometime during the third quarter of this year. So again, other projects that are not yet complete but underway and representing even more progress on the projects and objectives identified within the strategic plan. The slides that I'm going to run through here real quick are just a summary of the charts that were included in the packet that was sent out last week, and you can see all of the projects listed under the various focus areas. On this slide, under capital improvements, we have, I think, 10 projects listed, 9 of which have been started or are in some some portion of completion, and you can see on the right-hand side of the slide the years in which we anticipate work will be occurring on these efforts and these projects within this category. So here on the slide and in the packet is capital improvements. Moving forward, customer service is the second key focus area, and a lot of the items that appear on this slide relate to technology enhancements, which are being driven to some degree by the IT strategic plan that was completed and approved in late 2022, or I'm sorry, late 2021. And we've spent the better part of a year now upgrading various equipment and software across the organization. And as the council will note and remember, we were able to establish an IT capital fund as part of the 2023 budget, which is going to help us move forward on even more of these initiatives listed here. Notably, the zoning code update, codification, and records management, those are all big, heavy lifts that we're not going to be able to pursue here in the near term. Those are listed as out-year initiatives that we'll be strategizing on how to complete in the 2024-2025 timeframe. Moving along, financial stewardship is the third key focus area or pillar of the city's strategic plan. A number of these items I've already mentioned as either being completed, including the compensation plan review or the risk pooling effort. But 5 of the 7 projects listed here are currently underway, as noted on the screen. The fourth key focus area, public safety, as noted in the previous slides, we've made a fair amount of progress in this focus area. The SOFD merger with Thiensville, our police department was accredited mid last year. We've consolidated dispatch. Those are 3 major significant accomplishments, all of which are called out as specific projects on this slide. So we've been able to knock a number of these items off the list so far a year or so into the plan. And then lastly, quality of life, which centers, frankly, around our park system, which, you know, arguably does not have an appropriate or adequate level of funding to do everything that I know the city, the Common Council, and certainly the staff would like to see long-term for the benefit of not only our residents, but others who visit our parks from outside of the community. And you'll see a number of these items have been started or are planned to start here later this year, but they relate to implementation of the Parks Master Plan, which is scheduled to be updated next year, as well as other items relating to determining the future of the community pool and civic campus master planning. And I'll get to that in just a moment. So across the 5 key focus areas, we have charts, we have timelines, we have projects that have started, we have projects that have not yet quite started, but we have a plan that's going to help us as a staff and certainly keep you as elected officials abreast of the efforts and the completion that we're able to achieve as we move into the latter stages of 2023 and the out years of 2024 and 2025. So on that theme, looking ahead, a number of the projects that we're going to be working into the flow or the work queue in the latter part of this year and into 2024 include implementation of a number of Munis modules, including business licensing and work order systems, which will help improve the efficiency of not only our departments, but also the customer service that we're able to provide to our residents and others interacting with the city. My office has been involved in a number of efforts to enhance revenue streams, both through the state budgeting process that's continuing in Madison, as well as a comprehensive review of the city's entire fee schedule. We'll be bringing some recommendations forward on that as we get more into budget this year. The brush site automation project is in the pre-planning stages. We anticipate funds being allocated for that project prior to the end of 2024 and construction being completed sometime in 2025, if not next year. Also, our land management system, we started down this path but due to some turnover in the IT division, we had to put this on pause. Our new IT director just started on Monday. We're going to let him get his legs underneath him, and then he's going to be an integral piece of the team that will begin reigniting this effort on behalf of the Community Development Department as well as all of the other departments that are going to be plugging into this system. I mentioned the Civic Campus Master Plan and the Parks Master Plan updates. We'll also be working collaboratively with the Park and Open Space Board as well as the Mequon Thiensville Community Foundation to explore expanding partnerships to support capital funding for our recreational needs as well as our parks. There's been a lot of fundraising done at the Mequon Thiensville Community Foundation. They've made some targeted grants to our parks division, but we want to explore what else we can do to drive further progress across the 1,300 plus acres of parkland within our 26 to 27 public parks here across the city. So these are some of the more immediate projects that we'll be gearing up on as we look into 23, the latter part of 2023, and then into 2024. So kind of wrapping things up here, these are kind of the future steps that I see the council and staff may be considering as we go into budget in terms of both prioritizing the remaining projects that are contained within the plan, but also allowing us to stay on top of things so that we can remain accountable not only to ourselves, but the community that we serve. So in August, the 2024 budget process will be starting. Certainly, during the workshop meetings that we're planning to conduct, there will be time available that we can carve out if we want to have further discussions on components of the strategic plan or certain projects that might need to be prioritized or moved around from a timing standpoint. In November, all of our efforts and focus will be on approving the budget for 2024, so we'll be busy in that August to November, October timeframe rather, and we may not be able to spend a lot of time on the strategic plan. With that in mind, the thought I had was maybe conducting a mid-strategic plan retreat, much like we did a year ago back in February, where the council and the staff get together for a day early in 2024, and we could really do a deep dive on maybe the capital planning front, the long-term financial planning, as well as some civic campus planning related not only to the facilities here, but also our public safety facilities, which are going to be a key focus area for the Southern Ozaki Fire Department in their work plan during 2024. I would be happy to come back and give another annual update on the strategic plan mid next year, and then by 2025 we'd probably be in the phase of considering how we want to go about updating or crafting our second strategic plan as a successor to the document that we're working off of here today. So just kind of throwing this out here as food for thought for all of you. I don't know that we need to make any hard and fast decisions here today, but would be more than happy to revisit any or all parts of this presentation as we walk through budget kicking off here in the August-September timeframe. So with that, Mayor, I'm done and would be happy to answer any questions from members of the committee.
Alderwoman Schneider.
I'll just start with a comment. I'm really happy to hear that it was for lack of an IT supervisor that we paused the land management system, because that was one thing on this that alarmed me, because it is I think it's going to be such a wonderful and important part of city structure once it's initiated. My question, though, is we allocated $50,000 for training on our new modules. Has training begun?
Some training has begun, yes. And that relates to the existing modules that we have in place. But some of the money that we allocated through the ARPA funding is training for the new modules that we're looking to incorporate. I mentioned business licensing as one module that we'd like to incorporate and offer up to the organization and to our residents. Work order systems is more of an internal module that we're also looking to activate. And then there's a human resources module that I think is also on the work plan, and then a citizen self-service module that may or may not be part of Munis that we're also looking to explore further.
Thank you. In the past, we had some modules which we were paying for and not using because people had never really been trained in how to use them. So I'm happy to hear that that's underway.
Good question. Thanks. Alderman Bach.
I just want to say thank you. I know this is a lot of work. I don't know if there's been a history of this before in the city or if this was new. I can't remember, but I'm a big fan of operational kind of strategic plans. I think they give a clear roadmap to accomplish lots of goals and bring people together. So I think it's well done.
Thank you.
Alderman Parrish.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Administrator Jones. Thought this was an excellent report. I was thinking about last month's discussion about, we were talking about the staff reports and do we want those every month or quarterly or once a year, and I think this kind of wraps it all together. So I think in many ways, like staff accomplishments, as you update this grid, will be really important and almost in lieu of a staff report, so we know what they're accomplishing relative to the strategic plan. So that was one thought. Picking up off of what Alderwoman Schneider mentioned about the LIS system, and I understood why we didn't do it. That's a huge undertaking, and I remain concerned just about the impact it will have on staff time and resources, and remain open to outside help during its implementation so staff can get its other objectives done.
Well, I very much appreciate those comments, Alderman Parrish, and as was shown on the screen relative to the ARPA plan, rather, that was approved last fall, we have a significant amount of money dedicated to that land management system project, not only developing a centralized database, but also procuring a system which will serve as the basis for those improvements for years to come. The number, I want to say, if I go back to the slide, is north of $500,000. And those ARPA funds do need to be spent within a specified period of time. So the clock is ticking. There's a built-in deadline that will drive staff's efforts relative to this particular initiative. And we're going to get the new IT director up and running. And he's going to play an integral role in us moving forward on this particular item.
Had one more over here. Alderman Strelchak.
Just a follow-up for that. I think one of the things Alderman Parrish was asking was, do we have enough staff? Do we have enough space in their time to implement this system, or do you need something else? At least that's the way I heard it.
Well, as part of the effort initially that kicked off late last year and went into early this year, we had been working with the consultant that helped us develop our IT strategic plan, Avero Advisors out of Tennessee, and they had taken on a phase 1 and a phase 2 contract to help us begin scoping the land management system. Due to staffing considerations, as well as other pressing deadlines, I mean, the consolidated emergency dispatch was a project that sort of came up late in the year, and we had to shift our focus on some projects due to other deadlines. We put that project on pause, and so we've been in touch with Avero Advisors. We anticipate continuing to use them to help us get to the solution that we ultimately need here for Mequon. So yes, outside help, consulting help, and potentially other non-professional help that we may need in terms of converting databases or scanning documents, more technical work and less high-level information technology work is also contemplated as part of this project.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
What's the ETA and the timeline on the civic campus plan and what we're looking to do with it? I want to make sure that we're, keeping that at the forefront. We're talking. I saw the timeline up that you had on the board. but that's hitting right at or after budget. I was hoping that would hit earlier this year. I expected to see something come through, like the RFP info early this year, so that we could at least understand what we want to do with the civic campus as we're being asked to go into another budget cycle. And you know where I'm going with this kind of long term. You know what my end goal is.
Really, the timeline for civic campus master planning, long-term capital planning, and long-term financial planning really is dictated by you, the council. And if it's a priority as you see it relative to everything else that staff is working on right now, some things may have to shift. But we're in the middle of a lot, as I've outlined here throughout the presentation this evening. I'm thinking this might be the opportune time after we get through budget. Relative to civic campus master planning, it's probably going to involve a significant level of discussion regarding debt financing, borrowing money to fund any improvements. It's going to tie directly to the future of this building, City Hall, the future of the pool, and whether that gets rebuilt or relocated. And that's going to have a bearing also on our conversation relative to our public safety center, as well as East Side Fire Station number 2. Right now, I don't know that we as a city, you as a council, have a clear prioritization relative to where available funds from a debt borrowing would go and where those should be allocated. That's the conversation we need to have, and I think staff would need some time to pull together some data for the council to make good decisions.
So I was part of that meeting, and I wish the other newer council members were also part of that meeting, and we went through and we talked about things that were a priority. And you know, it's almost as if people forgot to put the pool up on the board when we worked through this until the end. And at the end, the pool got the most votes. That was something that we needed to address ASAP. The thing that's holding up the pool is the city campus master plan and yet another city budget cycle. I'd like to get at least some heavy discussion going on the pool this summer, where it's fresh in their minds and we can get some feedback. And during this term of office, for me, just to kind of at least get a direction going where we can get the city kind of jump started on where that could or possibly should go. You know, it's hard, and I know it all takes time, but to understand what our plan is based on a meeting, you know, that we had 2022, it's 23, it's going to be 24 before we, you know, as we're talking about the RFP for the city, you know, it's 2 years later that we're going to talk about a plan. That's, by the time anything gets done, that's, you know, one alderman's term. It sure would be nice to set in direction the vision from that meeting, the vision within council, and then put something actionable in place. Whether it happens immediately or not, based on budget and what the city needs, is to be determined. And it's a respectable area to pause. But when did you start with the city? What year?
2015.
2015. And I think it was like 2016 or 2017 you showed us pictures of the pool locker room and talked to us about an upgrade at the pool and how that really needed to be addressed, whether it was, you know, a year or 2 to 3 years after that. I've been on board for upgrading the locker room over at the pool and some of the basic core facilities, changing stations, places for people to go with children to enjoy the community pool within our city. We're starting to get comments on the fact that people aren't using our pool because our pool's outdated. It's in poor maintenance. It doesn't have some safety considerations that other communities, nearby communities that people can choose to build a house in or invest in when they come to the area have. and it's a hot button for me. So whatever I have to do to work with everybody here to try to set this as a priority for the civic master plan, to understand what we're doing at the pool and start some fundraising discussions and everything else, I would love to respectfully do. You know, you've done a great job within the city. You've put together the fire department. Everything on that list that you have listed as accomplishments, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of things that have been done. I know some of this is going to be like workload based. We can only get so much done with the people that we have at, at a certain time. But for me, now is the time. This is very important to me. At budget, I'm going to be the squeaky wheel on doing a weekend to expedite this. I'd like to start understanding what funding looks like and things that we might need to set aside for things like this to plan appropriately for the city so that, our community can come to town center and enjoy it. We've upgraded the crosswalks and all the other things and done, things like that, but the pool is just not in the shape that it needs to be in, and we need to address that ASAP. So that's what's driving this.
We can certainly put preliminary numbers in a hypothetical budgeting exercise, but we need a plan for the overall civic campus, including the pool. And that's not going to happen overnight. I think it's not just administration. There's other staff. The key staff members in community development and public works have been more than occupied getting the town center road project up and running, which was no small feat given the lax performance of our contractor getting that initial planning done, and now we're in the middle of executing it. I think we'll cap that off. That'll end in the fall. We'll get through budget. I think right after budget, it's a good time to pick up the ball because everyone's going to be fully consumed from about July through early October doing budget. It's the 2-month push every year, 2.5. Right after that, I agree, it's a good time to pick it up, but we need a plan, and we also have to kind of right-size our stomach and our eyes when it comes to the budgeting too, which is the debt financing that Minister Jones was speaking about. So I agree, I'd like to see it moving faster, but it is a staffing problem. We've only got so many people, and there's a lot of projects, and we have to finish some of them before we take on new ones. And I think later this fall, going into 2024 is the right time. I agree we need to get on it, and we've had several talks this year early on about preliminary planning. Not all of you were involved. I think we brought in Alderman Parrish for some real estate expertise perspective. So some of the wheels have been rolling. Just it hasn't been a agenda item at this level, but there has been some traction in that direction.
I would just add respectfully, like a lot of organizations and businesses and units of government, COVID put us behind a little, and the after effects of COVID and the high inflation environment that we've been dealing with, and it's real in terms of how we deal with it vis-a-vis an operating budget that's approved. We're limited in terms of how we can pivot from a budgetary standpoint. The point was made earlier about the land management system and getting that project reignited. Our former IT director left because he wasn't making enough money here in a high inflation environment. We could not meet his salary demands, and he went to the Germantown School District. And we're working as hard as we can to get that compensation plan done and implemented so we can keep the staff, and so we can keep the staff to keep these projects moving along like all of you want. So I hear what you're saying, Alderman Strelchek, but there are a lot of layers to this, and I would fully endorse a council-style day-long retreat to hash out this civic campus master planning and this capital funding late this year or early next year. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, we do have one more agenda item to touch. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Yep. Go ahead.
I just
Alderman
wanted
Hancher.
to lend my support to having another retreat because I think it's healthy for us to get together as a group to really go over what we need to discuss there's new members on the council, and everybody get put up to speed, and I think it's a healthy exercise to always revisit it, to see where we're going, see where we've been. So I'm in full support of having another retreat like we did in 2022.
Okay, we can certainly confirm that during the budget process if the council's so willing.
We'll do it. All right. Hearing and seeing no more comments, we'll move on to thank you, Administrator Jones, for the report and the good
thank you.
questions from the council. Next up, we have a resolution item to discuss, resolution adopting and implementing the City of Mequon Municipal Emergency Operations Plan. And Chief Pryor is going to give us a little overview.
Okay, I'm sure I provided the most exciting reading of the evening for everyone tonight. So in the interest of time, I prepared a little bit of a long statement, but essentially what the emergency management plan, it hadn't been updated in quite some time, so it needed to be looked over. We reached out to the Ozaki Emergency Management Division, sat down with the director of that up there, and he provided us with essentially boilerplate language for what he expects the municipal emergency management plans to be. So we took that information, we took our old city emergency management plan and combined the two things together and really made that into the document that you were provided through your email. So the purpose of the plan really is you know, to help the city officials carry out their duties during the event of emergency. It's essentially, it's our playbook. So it's a resource guide, it's a playbook. It provides that link between the city and the county, and then it gives the ability of the county to provide resources to the state and the federal level. So essentially what we did was combine those two books. I used the boilerplate language that was provided by Ozaki Emergency Management, and then rolled in all of our changes that we need to make at the city level. Our city ordinance provides for emergency management. That's section 2621. Details how local emergencies are administered. The mayor appoints the director of emergency management, subject to confirmation by the Common Council. The order of succession in the event that the mayor is unavailable to respond is first it's the president of the Common Council. If the president of the Common Council is not available, then the Public Welfare Committee chairperson is in charge. And whenever it's necessary to respond to an emergency that we don't have adequate ordinances for, the emergency management team can step in and enact those orders that have to be then followed up by the Common Council. So the procedures outlined in this plan serve as a link to the Ozaki Emergency Operations Plan, as I mentioned. I'm skipping around in my notes, as you can see. Access to the document, though, is limited to those individuals who need it. Obviously, there's a lot of confidential contact information on there. There's a lot of confidential information of how we use resources from other agencies and how many resources we can get at any given time. So the plan itself is confidential, but it will be provided to everybody that needs it. Certainly, it can be reviewed by any council member anytime. A lot of the specific information was added. I changed it to be appendices to make it easier for us to keep it up to date. Since the plan hadn't been updated in some time, I moved the things that change a lot to the end into an appendix section so that we could easily make those changes on a year-to-year basis. Last month, the Public Safety Committee discussed this and got a chance to review it, and then we brought it before you tonight for your consideration. Any questions?
Any questions from the committee? I think it's more important for us to know that it exists, and not that you have to memorize everything in it, but in the event of an emergency, it's a good reference for what's expected of us as elected officials and to know how things operate and such. So it's good to be aware of, and hopefully we never have to use it. But it's good to be prepared in case we do.
So when I get a phone call from the city attorney at 3 a.m, like I did when COVID came around, we will have everything ready to go. So
Perfect. Alderman Bach.
Yeah, I think I brought this up at the public safety too, and it's a great plan. It's nice that all the communities have the same plan. But the question in my head is, do some people in this group or others need some crisis training? So say you had we're all familiar with things that have happened in local communities, and hopefully it'll never ever happen in this city. But if there's a mass casualty event, there's people in this council that will have major roles, and maybe this happens, but some practicing, some reviewing, maybe you do that already, but it probably would be wise for some of that at some point from my point of view. That's my only.
Yeah, so I did reach out to the Ozaki Emergency Management Director, Scott Ziegler. He is making arrangements for us to host a class here. It's a 4-hour class for council members and political figures to do that very thing. So we have that in the works. We're trying to get that sometime in the between October and November, sort of after the budget's approved and before hunting and everybody tries to run away. So we do have that planned in the near future.
To your point, I recall several years ago, I had to take an online course from the state, I think. I don't know if that requirement's the same or not.
So that's what I was going to say. I mean, if you're a real nerd about this stuff, you can go through FEMA. They have their independent study program, which is all of their emergency management courses are available online. You can take the course. You take a little exam at the end online. You get a certificate of completion when you're done, and that's open to anybody, not only on the council, but certainly even citizens and staff members as well.
I mean, I'm just thinking more of like this, 2 or 3 hours, a quick tabletop. Where's your media center? How does that happen? How does the mayor get involved? What are the different roles? Just quick kind of tabletop practice.
Yeah, so we'll see what this course brings. I've taken a lot of these courses. I've never seen the structure for this one. This was the one that the emergency management director recommended for you folks. So.
Alderman Meyer. Excuse me. Alderman Meyer.
Question. From the previous list of succession that you had mentioned beforehand, mayor, common council president, public welfare, and that and the orders.
So if there's an emergency, the mayor appoints the acting emergency management director, and then that committee meets, and that committee is comprised of the city administrator, the current, if it's the mayor, or the council president, or the public welfare committee chairperson. That person is on the committee as well. So did I answer your question or no? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's for the committee position. If I'd have to reread the ordinance, but I think that's for the committee selection.
Any other questions? If we have any, we can always submit them after the fact. If there's any clarifications we need to make, or maybe a tweak to an ordinance, we can always look at that going forward.
I move approval for adopting the plan.
There's what I was looking for. A motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That goes on to the council. Future policy items for discussion, consideration, analysis. Does anyone have anything they'd like to bring up? We got one vote for the pool. Okay. I think we've got a plan for that, but thank you. If there's no other items now, we can always take them after the meeting and get them worked into a future committee of the whole agenda. So hearing none else, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. We will immediately slide into the Sewer Utility District Commission, and we'll let the record show that we're all still here. First is approval of the meeting minutes from April 11th.
Se-
Motion and a second. Any comments or corrections to the minutes? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Next up, we have resolutions. Resolution 4053, resolution authorizing staff to file the City of Mequon's Compliance Maintenance Annual Report, otherwise known as the CMAR, for fiscal or calendar year 2022 in accordance with requirements under Wisconsin Administrative Code NR 208.
Move approval.
So motion and a second. Any questions for Mr. Driscoll? Maybe just a 30-second overview on what this is for our new members. Some of us remember this every year, but we got 3 new people who've never seen it before.
Yes. Thank you, Commissioner Nurbin. Good evening, Commissioners. The item before you is the Compliance Maintenance Annual Report as required by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources for a municipality that's operating a sanitary collection system. It outlines maintenance such as inspections of facilities, condition assessments of lift stations, force mains, gravity sewers. In the past, this has included projects that are projected in the future, like the East Trunk Relief Sewer that was completed south of Mequon Road. And it included the Lift Station E replacement project, which is currently underway, along with other capacity improvement projects that are based on areas with historically frequent overflows. And that's based on model efforts in 2022, including the Fieldwood Drive Lift Station G and the Riverdale Park Lift Station F as projects in the future. So in addition to the projects for systematic rehabilitation and capital budget planning, it's to address compliance and avoid sanitary sewer overflows. The report automatically assigns a grade, and Mequon received an A, where in 2022, one of the first years since I've been here, that there were no SSOs reported. So with that, I can open it up to questions.
It's a pretty significant achievement.
Very pleased.
Okay. Any questions from the council? I can't recall what, we have a motion and a second, I believe. Or any comments or questions? If there are none, we can call the roll.
Commissioner Strelchik? Commissioner Tlako? Commissioner Meyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Hanchard?
Aye.
Commissioner Bach?
Aye.
Commissioner Parrish?
Aye.
Commissioner Schneider?
Aye.
Commissioner Gebhardt?
Aye.
Commissioner Nurbin?
Aye. That resolution is forwarded on to the council. Next up, we have Resolution 4054, resolution approving an award of a contract to complete inspections of 1,011 sanitary sewer manholes in various locations to the Sigma Group of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in the amount not to exceed of $48,496. Maybe a quick overview on this item as well, since there's some money involved.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Nurbin. Yeah, this inspection contract is based on the CMAR requirements for us to maintain the system. So one step is inspecting structures to see if there's any structural issues, operation maintenance issues, and then the next resolution that is before you is to do rehabilitation of manhole structures. So that's what this item is, and the inspection work is based on a 5-year cycle to cover all of the structures in Mequon.
Thank you. Is there a motion, perhaps?
I like to motion approve Resolution 4054.
Motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, please say aye or nay when your name is called. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Strelchik? Commissioner Tlako? Commissioner Meyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Hancher,
Aye.
Commissioner Bach,
Aye.
Commissioner Parrish,
Aye.
Commissioner Schneider,
Aye.
Commissioner Gebhardt,
Aye.
Commissioner Nervin.
Aye. And that moves on to the council as well. Next, Resolution 4055, a resolution approving the award of 2 contracts for the rehabilitation of 79 sanitary manholes with grout to Great Lakes TV and Seal Incorporated of Green Bay, Wisconsin, in the amount of $70,235, and for the rehabilitation of 37 sanitary manholes with epoxy to Visu Sewer of Pewaukee, Wisconsin, in the amount of $170,566.
Okay, again, this is a rehabilitation contract based on our CMAR and the inspection findings, where the grouting work is to stop the leaks, also known as infiltration, that occurs during wet weather like we currently have, where the elevated river levels can saturate the ground and the water finds the path of least resistance into structures that over time deteriorate, and that can take up capacity in the collection system and lead to overflows. So we grout those leaks and stop the infiltration. The structural component of applying an epoxy coating to the surface increases the longevity of the structures. So those are the 2 contract awards.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the commission? Commissioner Parrish.
Great work, and I'd move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further comments or questions from the commissioners? Hearing none, let's call the roll.
Commissioner Strelchak,
Aye.
Commissioner Tlako, Commissioner Meyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Hancher,
Aye.
Commissioner Bach,
Aye.
Commissioner Parrish,
Aye.
Commissioner Schneider,
Aye.
Commissioner Gebhardt,
Aye.
Commissioner Nervin.
Aye. That too moves on to the council. Next up, we have Resolution 4056, resolution authorizing a sanitary service deferral agreement for the property located at 12204 North Fieldwood Road. Director Lundin, I think, is going to take this one.
I'm just going to offer a bit of history. The background on this parcel is at one point in time, the property owner was seeking a building permit and the holding tank had failed and was otherwise leaking. So as a condition of that building permit, the city and the property owner at the time entered into an agreement whereby the property owner would connect the home to the public sanitary sewer system. Some of the building improvements were made, but the connection to the sanitary sewer was not. The property has since changed hands, and the current property owner is seeking a deferral from that agreement that was made with the previous property owner for the requirement for connection to the public main. The deferral would allow them to seek a permit through Ozaki County for the replacement of the holding tank and maintain a private system while continuing to pay the capital charges for MMSD, which is standard under city deferral agreements. Therefore, if the council tonight is looking to grant the deferral, then you can make a motion to recommend the resolution on to the common council. If you should so decide that you want to maintain the original maintenance agreement for connection to sanitary sewer, then you would recommend denial of the resolution, and we would otherwise uphold the requirement for the property to connect to public sewer.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the commissioners? I see some puzzled looks.
I guess
Commissioner,
I did
Schneider.
reach out with an email previously, but I'm a little confused because this structure back in 2015 was a non-conforming structure, like in a flood zone, apparently.
It still is.
And at some point it became unoccupied, correct?
Meaning there's no one living there right now?
Yeah.
To my understanding, yes, there is no one living there right now.
So is it still an intact structure?
Is it still an intact structure? I don't know.
Someone in the audience is going, no.
Yeah, and
It is
And it-
standing. If you mean has it collapsed? No, it has not collapsed, but
And it may not otherwise matter. The deferral runs with the property. So whether someone is able to bring the existing structure into compliance or whether someone were to raise and build a new structure, the deferral would run with the property. So the property owner is trying to understand the requirements for the property and whether that's connection to the public sanitary sewer or whether that's the allowance of a private system.
Yeah, this property's had a troubled past, to say the least. I think the sense I get is the current owner is trying to somehow bring it into compliance. And I think that's generally the goal the city should have, is to bring things into compliance, which if we give them a deferral, they maybe have a cheaper way to bring the whole site into compliance. There's a single family home there now. I think if it were raised, it would not be allowed to be built in the same location again because it's in the floodway. Not all the land on the parcel's in the floodway, but it's a pretty challenged site. Maybe we should bring that up. But the deferral is a different issue than the other compliance matters on the site. There's a whole host of other building code violations with the building itself. But this item only deals with connecting to the sewer or not connecting to the sewer. Commissioner Bach.
Is it the buyer's responsibility to check on the documents to see that, before you buy this property, that you're required to connect to the sewer based on that, whatever, 2015 or whatever that agreement was, or not, or no?
It's in the sewer service area, so the requirement is connection. They regardless of the 2015 deferral, because it's in the sewer service area, they would have to connect to the public system.
So the buyer knew that when they bought the property?
They should. Well, I can't speak to that. I don't know. You'd have to ask the buyer.
Yeah, the requirement's really the same. They're in the sewer service area. There's no sewer service there today because there is no functioning facility. So the default is connection. They're asking for a deferral, which has happened in other areas where it's geographically, it's not impossible to service this, but it's 575 feet away from the nearest sewer service, and the policy says if it's greater than 200 feet, they can apply for a deferral. So they're applying. Commissioner Parrish.
I was a little puzzled by this one too. I guess my first question is, it sounds like other properties would be granted the deferral because it's greater than 200. Just another property that's greater than 200 feet today applying would probably get it. Whereas we're trying to hold the new homeowner, because it runs with the land, responsible for kind of an old policy where maybe we didn't have that policy. So they signed in. But the deferral agreement, it's a reason for deferral.
So yes, there are other property owners in the area that have deferrals, including all of River Club Estates subdivision. So yes, there are other properties in the area that have seeked and received deferrals, as there are in many other areas of the city.
Okay, and it's not on city water, right? Or it is? Yeah, I may have more questions.
Yeah, I think our policy was the same back in 2015. They could have applied for a deferral. They didn't.
And let's be clear, in 2015 when this was going through, it was an emergency. I mean, the holding tank was leaking, the facility was occupied, and they were looking to make improvements to the building there immediately. And we can't really issue a building permit when there's not proper sanitary services on site. So a condition of the issuance of the building permit was the sanitary sewer connection so that they could move forward with some of the building improvements that they needed to do while working through the sanitary connection. They just made the building improvements and never made the sanitary connection.
Commissioner Strelchak.
I've got a little background on this property. I've actually been in the facility. Back again with the holding tank that failed. That was an issue. The owner at the time was holding out because the discussion with Weichert and his property was that he would have to have sanitary sewer, and that would have gone past his property and he could have connected. So that's why he explained to me personally. I don't want to, I'm not debating this. This isn't a two-way discussion on that portion of my conversation with him. He shared that he was waiting to apply because he was going to try to hook up to sanitary sewer as that subdivision came in, and he didn't do it. My understanding is that he built, this facility. There's several things that aren't in compliance. My concern as a council member is that there was an agreement in place. None of that ended up happening. The bottom floor on it, in my understanding, if you've been in it recently, is in a state of disrepair, and it wouldn't pass code currently. Is that correct? Has anybody been in the facility? Okay.
It's been a couple of years. We were out, when Paul Larner was the chief inspector, he was out. It was just before he departed, and that's been 3 years now, I think.
And at that time, it wouldn't have been compliant?
Correct. There were numerous code violations in existence at that time.
Kim Tollefson and I had talked about this property. There were several different statements to come into compliance. There was a lot of frustration with city staff and the occupant, and back and forth discussions to get this property within compliance. I know this is sewer, so I'm just preempting a little of this discussion because I know if we say yes here, it goes to council. If it does get approved by this group here today to be recommended to council, I would recommend several things in which we make sure the property is in complete compliance before approving this. That they do their due diligence on the holding tank if at all, or go through the city process and work with city staff to get the site within as close of compliance as city staff and or planning commission and or whoever else has to agree that that's an acceptable use, or we simply just deny this at this point.
That creates a chicken and egg problem. No one's going to invest in bringing the whole facility up to code and everything without working sewer facilities.
Right.
They're not gonna spend a dime on that until they know they can serve it with some sort of.
It would be an
sewer treatment
approval
facility.
contingent upon meeting city code compliance. They wouldn't be approved for any type of occupancy.
Well, we're not approving occupancy here. That's the problem.
Okay. So that's where your expertise comes in. I'm hesitant on this one. I hate to see a building be torn down because it's not in compliance. But I'm hesitant on approving this or recommending this.
Isn't the flip side of what Alderman Strelchak just said, approving the deferral, but subject to them bringing it into code compliance within like 180 days or something? Would that be a good solution? Like give them a time frame to bring it into compliance if we grant the deferral?
Yeah, you end up in a circumstance where they're unable to meet compliance for some reason, and then they lose the deferral, but they could have used the deferral as Director Lundin indicated, with a new structure that they built on site that may be in compliance. I'm not sure that's the best approach. It probably creates more problems than solutions.
What would you recommend?
I think quite honestly, it's either you grant the approval or not, is my position on it. I think a lot of the discussions about, the previous owner this and the previous owner that, none of that matters. He lost it. It was through a sheriff's sale. We've now gone through 2 subsequent owners, I think, maybe 3, that have been in contact with our respective departments. Each time they, acquire the property, hey, what do we need to do, to do this? The question really is do you want to grant a deferral for this property to allow it to be potentially used in some way, or are you going to require the connection as required by our policy otherwise? It's the same question, quite honestly, that we have every time we deal with one of these is, do you want to grant the deferral, or do you want to force them to connect, which is the default?
I think practically speaking, all the other history of the property aside, you've got a dilapidated, blighted structure with many, many code issues. Do you think you're better off forcing them to connect and run 575 feet of private sewer line, or granting them a deferral to make it more possible to do something on that site to bring the rest of it into compliance? There's no guarantee that they'll follow through on their word, just like Mr. Tucker didn't follow through on his word. But you could put maybe a time limit on the deferral. If they don't do anything for X number of months, and I don't think 180 days is enough. There's so many issues with that building. I'm not sure that 180 days would be enough to get contractors in and out of there to fix it all. More likely they're going to end up tearing it down, but they still have to have sewer service if they're going to have a single family home there. So Commissioner Strelchak.
I think for me, the dividing line is if this was a property 500 feet away that wasn't doing improvements with the condition that they'd have to connect to sewer back when an agreement was made with the city for the addition to the building. The addition was done and the connection to the sewer never happened. That was the agreement. I'm leaning towards sticking to my guns on that agreement versus, letting somebody do something different. If it was an existing home whose septic failed and they couldn't get another septic and they needed to put in a holding, and in order to stay in their home, they needed that, I would say yes. I would agree that would be the case, but that's not the case here today.
I'd have to ask the city attorney to weigh in on the legality of judging the situation, whether it's occupied or not. I think we might be in trouble there. So if the attorney has an opinion on that, I think we've run into similar instances before where...
In what way are you thinking?
Well, I just heard someone would make a motion to do one thing if it was occupied by an owner that was in trouble now versus someone who just owns the property and doesn't live there.
And wasn't doing an addition.
Yeah,
Addition is my driving factor here, and that was the agreement that was made.
They still have to take the rest of the site into compliance to occupy it.
Yeah, I guess...
That's not what we're voting on tonight. We're only voting on the deferral. That's why it's... Yes. They won't get occupancy on it if they don't fix the rest of the code items. This is just one of a plethora of code items. It's probably the biggest one, not having sewer services, but Alderman Meyer, Commissioner Meyer, sorry.
First of all, I'm surprised that the current investor, the current owner, that didn't do his due diligence in checking it. That's the first thing kind of pops up. But second of all, we granted this, taking away all the individuals inside of that, we granted this deferral in the past for it. And I think by not granting it this time, we're like punishing the current owner because we already had that deferral beforehand for good reasons to do that. Subsequently, whether or not the people followed through with that, the agreement beforehand, I don't have anything to do with the current owner inside of that. Letter stated to the fact that he assures us that it will get done, and in order for anybody to do any type of investment in that property at all or to bring it up to code, they're going to need to have this deferral. And we granted it before. There's no reason why we shouldn't be granting it now for them. And I'll be voting in favor of that.
The city attorney was going to speak before I ceded the floor to Commissioner Meyer.
That's all right. So I think to answer the mayor's question, Yeah, I do. Obviously, you're right that there are concerns about making distinctions between owner-occupied versus an investor or a non-resident type circumstance. You do have those concerns. With that said, and I think Alderman Strelchuk kind of jumped in and corrected it nonetheless, but certainly, as I heard Alderman Strelchuk's comments, I don't think that's his intent. I think it was based on other factors, maybe just inelegantly stated.
Thank you for that. Any further discussion, or is there a motion? Is there a second?
I'd make a motion to deny.
A motion and a second to deny. I would ask everyone to think about the property that's there and whether the odds of it getting cleaned up and brought into compliance are better off with a denial or with an approval. I think that you would, if you considered it carefully, you would probably find that the odds of it being brought into compliance are much greater if there's a deferral. Otherwise, we'll have a blighted structure there forever because no one's going to spend a dime to fix that up if they need to spend the money to run a sewer line 575 feet. I'm just throwing that out there. If our goal is compliance, we should probably vote in a direction that will achieve compliance.
Can you put?
I think that's the question was, what is the process to obtain compliance? And I think anyone from city staff can answer that.
Only speak to that there was a previous order to correct or summary of non-compliance issued, and it would be at least those items, but I can't speak to whether that's current with
So
the current condition.
I think last we know there was 2 or 3 pages of violations on the property that needed to get cleared up. This is but one of them. Who knows how they'll choose to rectify the other ones? It might involve tearing the building down. They could certainly try to chase the other ones around one at a time, but that's they're not going to do anything. I don't think if they can get sewer. That's my personal opinion. Commissioner Parrish, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to vote no to I'm not going to not deny it, and then assuming it doesn't pass, I would make another. You may withdraw. But my motion would probably be to grant the deferral, provided they come into compliance within a year, and if they've made no effort to come into compliance and they come and ask us for another extension, we're obviously going to say no. But if they're working their butts off, then we would probably. So.
I mean, to the extent that I think there are or is a desire to see, hey, can they actually accomplish bringing this into compliance, whether it's tearing the existing thing down and building a new something, or to try to do something with the building as it currently exists, in light of the fact that at the end of the day, it does run with the land. You run into problems the longer you delay that because it creates uncertainty, and nobody's going to spend the money if it's not a for sure thing at some point. My recommendation would be the way that we would typically deal with if we had a municipal citation, for example, in this type of circumstance. You give them a short period of time, maybe 60 days in this case, to say, okay, bring us the plan, whatever that is. Fix the structure. Here's how we're going to fix the structure. Here's the plans for the new house. Whatever that looks like, and to then grant the deferral once you have that specific plan in place. That would be your best chance at realistically getting that done. Now, I'm not saying that the property owner here is going to agree to that, because obviously, you know, for example, if he's going to tear down the existing house and build a new one, you know, he may not want to spend the money to do architectural plans to come up with the new design and everything else if he doesn't know that he's going to get the deferral for sure. But that would be about the only way I can think of that you could coax him down that approach.
Do we table then for 60 days? Is that what that looks like?
Functionally, if I were someone investing in that property, I wouldn't spend a dime if there was.
Yeah, but yeah,
Depends on how much of a detailed plan you're talking about. I mean, it could be as simple as bullet points and dates by which they plan to accomplish it, and that could be done relatively quickly. But
I mean, the owner might not even know how much it's going to cost to make those repairs, right? The owner might
They
come
may not.
back and say, "Hey, it's not, you know, I'm not going to make these repairs. I'm going to tear it down." Well, then if that was the case, then I would be saying, "All right, well,
could be
then
wrong, but my personal read on this is they're trying to figure out if they want to mess with it based off of this vote.
So you could say, "Hey, come up with come up with the plan." And then, you know, give you what is your plan for this property, and then talk about the deferral.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, you could put okay, why don't we, I like the idea of a deadline, but I think the ask has to be pretty simple. Provide us your plan and your general timeline, and if we're satisfied with that plan, then we can let it stick with the property. If we're not, we can have them come back and present here and at such time when he can ask for it again. Does that satisfy?
So there, I guess I have two questions. One is whether or not this body wants to see the plan before taking action. Certainly an option would be we would grant the deferral contingent upon staff reviewing a plan that satisfies staff's desire to do that, and then not have it come back, or you could have it come back to this body. Would be, I guess, question one. Second one really isn't a question, but more of just a statement, just based on experience. You're going to want something more than just here's my time frame to get it. I mean, you're going to want probably cost estimates, time for whatever particular repair that's going to be associated with it, from somebody in the industry to do it, because otherwise you're going to get somebody that's just going to say, oh well, I gotta raise the basement 6 feet to make it flood proof, and that'll be $20 and it'll take me a week and a half to do it. It's just not realistic. So you want to incentivize them to make sure that they're coming in with legitimate, detailed cost plans and timing to do that, not just we're going to do this in 6 months kind of a thing.
Commissioner Tlaco.
I have a couple concerns. One is what they plan to use the building for. It was my understanding that they were going to try and possibly turn it into like an Airbnb, so it wouldn't even necessarily be for like family use. The other issue with the debate of whether to grant this or deny this is that it is a non-conforming house. It's been vacated. We have a city ordinance stating that the city then can take over this building after 12 months of non-occupancy. As far as the non-conforming, we've held everyone else upon the river to these standards, and to make an exception, I think we need to either go one way or the other when dealing with non-conforming houses. You can't treat people closer to the river one way and then treat this house an additional way. So I don't feel like there's enough information to really...
I don't think we're treating these people any differently. There's many people near the river that have deferrals to have holding tanks, and the rest of the structure, we have been holding them accountable. That's part of the reason it ended up in a sheriff's sale. Yeah. Yep. In fact, yeah, we're treating this one just like everyone else, and that's part of how they got here. Commissioner Strelchak.
So my question is, it's a question, not a comment. following up with what the mayor said, I don't want to make a decision here or at council that's going to have the neighbors of Villita Park and the river and Friedstadt and Fieldwood looking at basically an abandoned building, asking why city council didn't do something about that. So I'm trying to prevent that from happening in considering removing my motion. The other side of things is that it's a non-compliant property. There's several different violations that didn't allow it to be inhabitable before, in addition to the fact that the holding tank wasn't there in working order, or it was required to be hooked up to city sewer. And I want to hold to that standard. So being torn, city attorney, is there a way I can craft a slightly different motion that accomplishes both of those goals? Can we limit it to the dwelling as it stands currently? Because my understanding is that it runs with the land, correct?
Correct. I was just going to offer that the deferral is recorded against the property. Just as a reminder, the deferral is exactly that. So if public sewer was ever run down here in the future, they would be compelled to connect, just as they are in all of our other deferral agreements that we otherwise have. And all I was also going to offer is that the dozens of phone calls that we've gotten for this property, they're looking for the conclusion. Is the property required to connect to the public sewer, or will they be allowed to replace the holding tank? So as it relates to consideration of tabling, regardless of how many times this property may continue to change hands, or whether it's this building or another building, they're looking for the conclusion as to whether it would be on a holding tank or on public sewer.
Back in the day, they thought that figure was about 125 to 150,000. Do we have an estimate as to what that might be?
I do not. The property owner provided one, but I think to the point of all of this, it kind of depends on what exactly they're looking to do. I think the figure that was provided was high for what would essentially be a grinder pump and a force main to get into that manhole, but I've not priced it out to speak to it. And unfortunately, we are seeing high rates from contractors these days, even ourselves, so that may be a valid price if they otherwise request.
So what is that valid price that was tossed out there? Just
Their estimate was
$300,000.
$300,000 versus $20,000 for a holding tank. Now, could it be overstated? Sure, but it's probably close to 200. If it was 150,000 back in 2015 dollars, prices have gone up considerably.
Well, as I say, I mean, certainly part of that goes back to the question that I posed, which is, does this body want to see the end result, or are you okay with a staff determination that something's okay? If the intent would be to have staff bless some plan, then it would be a motion to conditionally approve the deferral request, conditioned upon the property owner submitting a detailed cost and time plan for bringing the property into compliance from a building code perspective before the deferral would actually be officially granted, and to put Ms. Tollefson, 60 days, you think, for a plan?
The problem with that is that there would be no building permit without the holding tank.
No, we're not talking about
We're
building
asking for a
permits. This
plan.
is just the plan to get the work done. So I'm going to come in, and one of the things is the house needs to be flood proof. That's the one that's in my head. There's a time that's associated with that. There's a cost that's associated with that. identify what that is. How are you going to accomplish it? Get it done. The floorboards, I think, was another one that there's holes in the first floor that you can see into the basement. What is the cost to get that done? What is the time frame to get that done? Have all of those identified. I think 60 days personally would be enough to get that accomplished, and then have staff approve that plan, at which point the deferral would be formally issued. And if they don't do it within the 60 days, then they just don't get the deferral.
Unless I'm wrong, or I think all of our goal is to make sure this turns into a compliant single-family home structure. However they plan to do it, I would probably donate it to the fire department. Be the most expedient way. But that's just me.
So
Is that indeed our goal, just by show of hands? Is that our goal, is a compliant single-family home structure on this site? It's zoned for residential, so it'd be consistent with its zoning. We just want all the violations cleaned up so it's a compliant single-family home. Is that our goal? Does everyone agree? I think everyone's agreeing. Okay.
I think that's, and I like the city attorney's wording of that, because I think if you grant the deferral, there's no guarantee that these improvements are going to be made anyway. So you might think that they might get it done, but I think if you just say yes, there's no guarantee. It could still sit there.
Well, and to be clear, though, certainly under the motion that I've just proposed, we could approve a plan and they could still not do anything to do with it. It could continue to sit there and be a problem, but...
Commissioner Gebhardt, would you be okay if I withdrew my motion? And would you possibly do the same? And then if I made a motion that mirrored exactly what Attorney Sajak said? Because that was a long motion.
So I struggle with a couple of things here. I've been a little bit quiet and just letting this percolate a little bit, but I struggle with the fact that you've got an owner that bought an existing property with conditions. Okay, and those conditions follow that property. Whether he knew it or not, it was his responsibility to do the due diligence. The second piece that I heard, which I didn't see in the write-up, is that this was purchased at a discount. So I don't think it's unreasonable for them to go through some additional efforts and trying to go ahead and figure out what their plan is to fix up the rest of the issues, because one without the other doesn't get us to an end goal. And if we allow them to put in a holding tank at $20,000 or whatever that cost is, then I think it should be conditional upon some of the other issues with that property. And I struggle with how we get there. So if there is a way to compromise there, I'm open to that suggestion.
Attorney Sajak's statement seemed to address the other conditions with the property by having staff review and accept a plan. They very easily could say that it's just too much, they don't want to review it. It could come back to us or it could come back to council, either way. They've done that in the past if they've been uncomfortable and they don't agree with the property owner as to what needs to be done. But I think at that level it does state that they have to have a plan. I'm okay going 90 days on a plan. Nothing's granted. They're not sitting with anything granted. To give them an extra month, that would be the only thing that I would adjust. So at this point, I'd like to remove my motion from the table. I agree with you 100%. The property owner did purchase a property that was in a condition that wasn't inhabitable. However, I think at some point in time, I agree with what the mayor said. We have to address a way to get that property into compliance and have it be not an abandoned structure, which it is sitting at currently.
What we've been doing since 2015 hasn't been getting the result we're desiring. So,
yeah.
Director Lundin.
But it doesn't give
Well, the advantage to that, I'm kind of liking that. It settles the issue of public sewer or holding tank forever. And we did check with the county today. They would permit it.
And that's actually what made me think of it was the county followed up to say if the deferral is granted, please have the property owner execute the holding tank agreement.
So it's not like the county wouldn't permit it based off of where it's located. The county would normally permit it. So we're not asking the county to do anything it wouldn't otherwise do. But then we can,
But that way the answer to private versus public is answered, but again, it doesn't give the property owner the right to be able to move forward until that holding tank agreement is executed, and that can be contingent upon the plan or plans or whatever.
and if the plan's not credible, then they never get the permit.
Correct, but at least the answer for all future property owners as it relates to
And they may sell it to someone who has a more credible plan to fix it up. But at least that's not holding the property back. I suspect this has probably been holding the property back from getting cleaned up sooner. 'Cause it hasn't just changed hands once, it's changed hands at least 2 or 3 times.
There's a for sale sign on it again,
Yeah, I noticed the realty sign changed again.
about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change the fact that it's still in a floodplain. So maybe that has an impact as to why it continues to change hands and why they
That's
aren't
certainly not
sticking
helping
more
it.
investment into that.
This is a challenged site that's going to cost a lot of money to get into compliance regardless. I'm sure that an extra $100,000 or $200,000 of sewering cost is making it impossible. I mean, you just can't, the site's not big enough to put a big enough house on it to make that investment ever pay off. It's just not going to happen. And we'll be staring at that structure for a couple more years and probably have to issue a raise order, and then we'll end up having to do it and charge it back. It's going to get ugly. So I'd rather see the whole site taken care of, and I think this is our best path towards getting compliance overall, but I could be wrong. Nothing guaranteed. Commissioner Parrish.
Regardless, why can't it sunset after like 12 months or 24 months if they haven't done anything? I don't get that. Like, why can't we pull the deferral?
Because I guess it's recorded against the property, and that
So we'll
we'd have
record
to-
something new, you know? They didn't
Well,
meet- and that's also, because it was recorded, the buyer should have seen that.
I think that's a fair question. Why would it change based off of this guy doing it or not? If this guy doesn't follow through and doesn't do anything, he'll sell it to someone who can maybe more easily do it.
And at least then the deferral is recorded against the property, so then everybody has to question it. Or not, I guess, either. Because many of us might think that this was part of the due diligence that would be done before purchasing the property, but we've fielded dozens of phone calls, maybe it was prompted by the new real estate sign, if that's what otherwise went out, with people asking this exact question: can I make improvements while I'm holding tank? And that's what's before you tonight, is the answer to that question. Can improvements be made to the property with it being on a holding tank? Or is there requirement to connect to public sewer? So for any property owner from now until forever forward, or until we have sanitary sewer down the road, is can they be served on a private system, or are they required to connect to the public system? The deferral allows them the private system. The denial of the deferral would require them to continue to connect to the public system.
And certainly one of to answer the first part of the question, one of the concerns that you always have where you're talking about real substantive property rights at the end of the day, I mean, that's what we're talking about. If you grant a right to do something and you can just revoke it, that's where you get claims that you're doing regulatory takings, you know, that you got to buy my house now effectively because of that. And, you know, can you do things to try to minimize those types of arguments? You know, you record 1 million documents against the title that make it clear that here's your drop deadline, all of those things. But you never know what the future holds and who's going to buy it, and whether or not the court is going to be particularly susceptible to their sob story when they get there. It's not granting rights and then taking away rights is just not a good idea ever, and certainly not in this case, I don't think.
Commissioner Delaco.
So my understanding is that if the deferral is granted and we allow the holding system tank to be installed, that would allow the current owner then to make improvements. However, there would not be occupancy given until those improvements were undertaken and inspected. So that would allow the property not to be an eyesore, for it to be able to get fixed while also following in line with the rest of everything that needs to be taken. Is that correct?
I think that's generally correct. I think it's more likely that they're looking to get sewer to serve it with a holding tank to see if they're even willing to put any improvements in it. Why would you put a penny in that if you didn't want to spend the money to be on the public sewer system, which we can debate the cost of it, but it's well in excess of the cost of a holding tank. I don't know that you'd put a single penny into the rest of the structure to clean it up until you knew one way or the other on that. At least I wouldn't. I would wait to see how this played out and decide if I'm going to dump it and run or continue to go. Commissioner Hancher.
Well, why don't we just make it a clean cut, either yes or no on the deferral? Why go through all this other complication? Just make it either yes or no on it. And then if you make it the deferral and they do nothing with it, then the next owner, if they sell it, at least they know what they have and what they can or cannot do. It just makes it a clean cut.
Commissioner Meyer.
I mean, if we turn this down, aren't we just going against our own code of ordinance? I mean, it clearly just states.
Well, it says if they're more than 200 feet, they can apply for a deferral. It doesn't say we have to give it, but we have tended to grant them more often than not when they're excessively far away from the service. So it doesn't say they're automatically granted. It says that they can ask for it.
Well, it just says a holding tank shall be allowed to replace a failing septic or mound system, reasonable alternative.
So
No, but you got that one right.
But just say legally possible and practical, and the cost factor inside it doesn't make it practical.
Practical, I think, means, yeah. They don't want to mention cost in there, but I read the 200-foot limit as a rough measure of cost.
At the end of the day, I don't want people looking at a blighted property. I want to give this owner a chance. I'm going to remove my motion from the table. I'm going to make a secondary motion that mirrors exactly what the city attorney said. Do we want to change the words from deferral to holding tank permit? And I would like to make it 90 days. Do you need to rephrase that one more time, or can we effectively go back on the tape and
Well, I think if you wanted to adopt the concept that Director Lundin suggested, the motion would be a motion to grant the deferral, but that action on any application for a holding tank permit agreement, any action on the holding tank agreement would be stayed until such time as the property owner provided the aforementioned plans. And if you want to say 90 days, then say 90 days.
And if it doesn't happen within 90 days, do we need to state if they don't provide it in 90 days?
Well, under the approach Director Lundin has suggested, that the deferral is always granted. We just will not act on a request to enter into the holding tank agreement until somebody gets us a plan, whether it's the current owner, the next owner, 3 owners from now, whoever it is. They can always come in and say, hey, here's the plan, give me my holding tank agreement, and we'll say, okay, if it makes sense.
You almost don't need to put a time
So,
limit
so
on
the
it.
90 days is irrelevant at this point.
Well, yeah. I think Alderman Strel, or Commissioner Strelchak got it. The time limit's almost irrelevant under that construct because it still gives us the feedback mechanism with staff, but they can choose to do it at any time because they can't do anything until they provide the plan because they won't get the agreement, so they won't get the permit from the county.
All right, that's my motion.
I would second the motion.
It's an ugly one, but it works. Yeah, Brian.
Probably not a
you
bad
got
suggestion.
Okay, so removing the timeline. So that's the motion, removing the timeline, but requiring that city staff review and make sure that the plans
Right. Simply
meet city code.
Simply stated, the motion is to approve the deferral, but to withhold action on any application for a holding tank agreement until such time as the property owner prepares and provides staff a plan to bring the property into compliance building code-wise.
That.
Perfect.
I would second the motion.
The motion and a second. Any further conversation? Seeing and hearing none, please call the roll.
Commissioner Strelchak,
Aye.
Commissioner Chalaco,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Hancher,
Aye.
Commissioner Bach,
Aye.
Commissioner Parrish,
Aye.
Commissioner Schneider,
Aye.
Commissioner Giphart,
Aye.
Commissioner Nurbin.
Aye. That brings us to the end of the Sewer Utility District Commission. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, let's reconvene in 5 minutes. Give everyone a little bit of a break. You're all back. I'd like to call the Common Council meeting of June 13th to order. Please do the Pledge of Allegiance. Please call the roll to make sure we're all back. I think we are.
Alderman Stralchek,
Here.
Alderman Talaco,
Here.
Alderman Meyer, Alderman Hancher,
Here.
Alderman Bach,
Here.
Alderman Parrish,
Here.
Alderman Schneider,
Here.
Alderman Gebhardt,
Here.
and Mayor Nurbin.
Here. We're all back. Good. First up, we have personal appearances and public comment. Citizens wishing to address the council on any matter not on the agenda may do so at this time. If you desire to be heard on an agenda item, you may be heard when that item is considered on the agenda. Please speak into the mic. Time limit is 5 minutes. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak on any item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to public officials' reports. I have none for this evening. Mr. Administrator, do you have anything?
Mayor, I do not have a report this evening. Thank you.
Excellent. We'll move on to the consent agenda. We have various meeting minutes from boards and commissions and a couple of reports. Is there a motion on the consent agenda? Items A through N.
Move to
Anyway.
approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on those items? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And the consent agenda is approved. We also have 3 ordinance first readings. These will not be acted upon unless there's a suspension of the rules. So our first ordinance first reading tonight is ordinance 2023-1651, an ordinance amending section 58-441, print 11 of Mequon Municipal Zoning Code related to residential parking requirements. This is recommended by Public Welfare on April 11th and recommended by the Planning Commission May 24th, and it is a first reading. Second is ordinance 2023-1639, an ordinance amending section 46-133 and chapter 50 of the Mequon Municipal Code relating to nuisances within the city, including noise. This was recommended by Public Welfare Committee on February 14th, first reading at Common Council March 14th, tabled at Common Council on April 11th, a recommendation forthcoming by Public Welfare Committee this evening. What was that recommendation of the committee? Okay, so approved this evening by Public Welfare Committee and is a first reading.
Second.
A motion and a second to suspend the rules and take up this ordinance tonight. Please call the roll. On
Alderman,
on suspending the rules.
Alderman Stralchek,
Aye.
Alderman Talaco,
Aye.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
Alderman Bach,
Aye.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Schneider,
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt.
Aye.
Okay, we have suspended the rules and this item is before us. Is there any discussion or questions for staff? Mr. City Attorney.
If I might, just simply because if for no other reason than it's the first time up, just one to make note of the fact that Public Welfare did recommend adopting the revised version. That's the second version of the ordinance that's in the packet. The only change between the two, the one that was the first one and the second one in the packet, is really the language as it relates to construction noise. The old version effectively created we don't allow accepts and head times, whereas the revised version basically says here's the times that you can do it. It's a little bit clearer, a little bit simpler to follow, is the big change. Certainly beyond that, if anybody wants me to go through any of the additional changes, there's a lot obviously to this ordinance. I'm happy to do so, but it's also explained in the memo in the packet.
Thank you. Good clarification.
Make a motion to approve ordinance 2023-1639 with the amended version.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions? I know it's been back before us a couple of times. So we've seen it before, most of us, at least once. Hearing and seeing none, why don't we call the roll on this item?
Alderman Talaco,
Aye.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
Alderman Bach,
Aye.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Schneider,
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt,
Aye.
Alderman Stralchek.
Aye.
And that ordinance is approved. Moving on to ordinance 2023-1652, the ordinance amending Chapter 2 of the Mequon Municipal Code incorporating various changes resulting from the First Amendment to an intergovernmental agreement establishing the Southern Ozaki Fire and Emergency Medical Services Department. Recommendation forthcoming from Public Safety this evening. I assume it was approved. Okay. This is a first reading. We'll take action on it next month. That's all for the first readings. Next up is ordinance 2023-1650, an ordinance amending Chapter 2 of the Mequon Municipal Code, adjusting the travel and training meal allowance to $60 per day. This was recommended by Finance and Personnel on May 9th, and the first reading was last month as well on May 9th at the Common Council.
I'd move to approve ordinance 2023-1650.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions regarding this item? Hearing none, let's call the roll since it is monetary, but not a huge amount, but monetary nonetheless.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
Alderman Bach,
Aye.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Schneider,
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt,
Aye.
Alderman Stralchek,
Aye.
Alderman Talaco.
And that item is approved. On to resolutions. Resolution 4052, resolution adopting and implementing the City of Mequon Municipal Emergency Operations Plan recommended earlier this evening by Committee of the Whole.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all those please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That resolution is adopted. Resolution 4053, resolution authorizing staff to file the City of Mequon's Compliance Maintenance Annual Report for calendar year 2022 in accordance with requirements under Wisconsin Admin Code NR 208. This was recommended earlier this evening by the Sewer Utility District Commission.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that resolution is approved as well. Resolution 4054, a resolution approving award of a contract to complete inspections of 1,011 sanitary sewer manholes in various locations to the Sigma Group of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in the amount not to exceed of $48,496. This was also recommended earlier this evening by the Sewer Utility District Commission.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
Alderman Bach,
Aye.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Schneider,
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt,
Aye.
Alderman Stralchek, Alderman Talaco, Alderman Meyer.
Aye.
That is approved as well. Resolution 4055, resolution approving the award of 2 contracts for rehabilitation of 79 sanitary manholes with grout to Great Lakes TV and Seal Incorporated of Green Bay, Wisconsin, in the amount of $70,235, and for the rehabilitation of 37 sanitary manholes with epoxy to Visu Sewer Incorporated of Pewaukee, Wisconsin, in the amount of $170,566. This was also recommended earlier this evening by the Sewer Utility District Commission.
Motion to
approval.
approve.
Motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Alderman Bach,
Aye.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Schneider,
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt,
Aye.
Alderman Stralchek,
Aye.
Alderman Talaco, Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
and Alderman Hancher.
Aye.
And that item is approved as well. Resolution 4056, a resolution authorizing a sanitary service deferral agreement for the property located at 12204 North Fieldwood Drive. This was recommended earlier this evening by the Sewer Utility District Commission with a couple of amendments to the language.
Move approval as amended.
Motion and a second. Any further conversation? Hopefully not at this point. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That resolution is adopted as well. There are no specified unfinished business from prior meetings. We do have some specified new business, a mayoral appointment to the Library Board of Trustees, Ally Buchanan. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Jan?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And that appointment is approved, which brings us to our last item, a potential closed session of 12701 North Farmdale Road LLC and Grizzly Acres LLC nuisance/permit issues. The Common Council may convene into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85 Prin 1 Prin G for the purpose of conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved, and then may reconvene into open session to take such action as deemed appropriate. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
Move to go into closed session.
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Alderman Parrish.
Aye.
Alderman Schneider.
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt.
Aye.
Alderman Strelchak. Alderman Talaco. Alderman Meyer. Alderman Hancher.
Aye.
Alderman Bach.
Aye.
Mayor Nurbin.
Aye. We'll be now in closed session. I do not anticipate we'll be back, so good night, everyone.